The Amityville Horror, The House That Would Not Sleep, Chapter 1, Ocean Avenue. I had heard the name long before I ever saw the house. Everyone in America has. Amityville. It is the kind of word that arrives with a shadow attached to it, even if you do not remember the details. It suggests a quiet street, dark windows, and a history that refuses to stay in the past. When my spouse and I first saw the listing for 112 Ocean Avenue, we stared at the screen in disbelief. 6 bedrooms, a finished basement, a boathouse on the canal, enough space for our kids to grow without tripping over each other. The price was the only part that felt like a mistake. We asked the realtor why it was so low. She answered as if she was reading from a sentence she had practiced many times. "There was an incident," she said. Years ago." She did not have to say more. We already knew. A man, a family, a night of gunshots that became a headline and then a legend. But the man was in prison. The house had been cleaned and renovated. Priests had walked through with prayers and holy water. Time had passed, and time was supposed to mean something. We wanted a home. We wanted stability. We wanted to believe that a building was only wood and nails. The first afternoon, the house looked ordinary in the winter sun. White siding, dark shutters, a porch that faced the street. Behind it, the canal moved slowly, and the reflection of the house on the water was so clear it looked like another house waiting underneath. Inside, the rooms were bright. The kids ran up the stairs laughing, calling dibs on bedrooms. My spouse stood in the kitchen, smiling like a person finally exhaling after years of holding their breath. I remember thinking, maybe the story is just a story. That night, the house became very quiet. Not the normal settling of an old home, not the creak of pipes. It felt like the house was holding itself still, listening. At 3:15 a.m., I woke up. No nightmare, no sound, just awareness, sharp as a pin. The digital clock glowed red, 3:15. The air tasted cold, like metal. I lay there waiting for something to happen. Nothing did. In the morning, I told myself I had simply woken at a strange hour. New bed, new place, a tired brain searching for patterns. But the next night, it happened again. 3:15 a.m., wide awake. Chapter 2, The First Changes. By the third night, the temperature dropped so suddenly that my breath fogged in the dark. Frost traced pale veins along the edges of the bedroom window, even though the heater was running. I stood there in my socks, staring at the glass, trying to find a reasonable explanation. The kids began complaining about smells in their rooms. Rotten, wet, like something forgotten in a basement. We washed bedding, opened windows, sprayed freshener until our eyes watered. The smell returned anyway, stubborn as a memory. One afternoon, our youngest asked me, very calmly, "Why does the man stand in the corner at night?" I laughed too quickly. "No one stands in your room." He frowned. "He does. He doesn't move. He watches the door." My spouse and I traded a look we tried to keep normal. Kids invent things. Kids fear darkness. Kids hear stories and build monsters. We told ourselves that, and we told him it was his imagination. That evening, the flies arrived. Not one or two. Hundreds. They gathered at the windows as if drawn by light, crawling over the glass, buzzing in a thick, sick sound that made the whole room feel dirty. We swatted until our arms ached. We vacuumed piles of dead insects from the sills. We checked for a nest, a crack, a source. There was no source. The next day, they were back. And by the end of the week, the first stain appeared on the hallway wall, dark, smeared as if something wet had seeped through the paint. I pressed a finger to it. The stain felt cold. "Water damage," I said, forcing confidence. "Old pipes." Then the stain began to drip, slow, sticky, red. The first time I saw it, I stood there long enough for a drop to fall and hit the floor with a tiny, soft sound. I stared at the dot it left behind and felt something inside me recoil. I scrubbed the wall until the paint dulled. The stain faded. The next morning, it was back, thicker, darker, as if the house was making the mark deeper on purpose. We began sleeping poorly. We began snapping at each other over small things. We began moving through the house with caution we did not name. And every night, like a bell in the dark, 3:15 arrived and woke me up. Always awake, always listening, always waiting. Chapter 3. The basement. The basement door was at the end of a short hallway, tucked beside a closet, like something the house did not want you to notice. At first, we avoided it. We stored boxes down there and told ourselves we would organize later. But the longer we lived in the house, the more the basement seemed to pull at the edges of my attention. The first time I went down alone, the stairs felt steeper than they should have. The light switch clicked, and a single bulb flickered weakly. The air smelled like damp concrete and something else, something sour and old. I reached the bottom step and stopped. The silence down there was different. It did not feel empty. It felt crowded. I heard whispers, not clear words, more like the suggestion of speech, a soft rush that made my skin tighten. When I held my breath, the whispers did not stop. They continued as if they were not meant for ears, but for bone. I told myself it was the furnace, the pipes, the wind. I walked forward anyway, stepping between boxes. A cold pocket of air wrapped around me, sudden and sharp. It felt like someone had opened a freezer door inside my chest. Then I heard my own voice. Not from my mouth. From the far corner of the basement, behind stacked boxes, a calm version of my voice spoke like a thought. You should stay. I froze. You should listen. My heart hammered and I took a step back. The bulb overhead flickered. The whispers thickened, pressing against my skull. For a moment I felt a strange warmth, like relief, because I was not alone down there. That thought terrified me more than the whispers. I went upstairs and did not tell my spouse. I told myself it had been stress, imagination, the echo of my own thoughts. But that night, when the house woke me at 3:15, I lay in bed and felt the basement below like a heartbeat. Days passed, then weeks. The voice returned in small ways. In the kitchen, while I washed dishes, they don't appreciate you. In the hallway, while the kids argued, they are too loud. In the living room, while my spouse talked about bills, they are ungrateful. It always sounded like me, calm, reasonable, certain, and slowly, without noticing, I started believing it. Chapter 4. Isolation. We stopped inviting people over. At first, it was practical. We were busy. The house was still half unpacked. The holidays were coming. But then friends began making excuses, and I realized it was not only us. My sister visited once. She stepped through the front door, paused, and frowned as if the air had changed. It smells like pennies, she said, like metal. I laughed. Old house. She tried to smile, but she kept glancing down the hallway as if expecting someone to appear. After 20 minutes, she stood abruptly. I'm sorry, she said. I feel sick. I need to go. After she left, my spouse stared at the closed door for a long time. It's just her, they said. But the words sounded thin. The kids stopped bringing friends home too. One child admitted quietly that their friends said the upstairs felt wrong, that the rooms were too cold, that the corners felt full. We argued more. Not normal arguments, sudden fights that exploded like matches. We fought about the thermostat, about the dishes, about whether the kids should be allowed to sleep in our room. Afterward, we could barely remember what started it. We only remembered the certainty that the other person was wrong. The house made our anger feel righteous. One night I found myself walking the hallway with a flashlight, checking locks, checking windows, and checking doors I had checked 10 minutes earlier. My hands shook, but my mind was oddly calm, like the house was doing the worrying for me. In the dining room, the wall stain had spread into a thin river of red that followed the trim. I wiped it, and my cloth came away damp and pink. From upstairs, the kids whispered in their room, and the sound made irritation flare through me, fast and hot. Be quiet, the voice inside me suggested. Make them quiet. I stopped in the hallway and pressed my palm to the wall to steady myself. The wallpaper felt cold and slightly damp, like skin. I realized then that I was afraid of my own thoughts. and somewhere behind that fear, the house waited, patient, as if it knew time would do the rest. Chapter 5. The Blessing. We brought in help when denial stopped working. A priest from a nearby parish agreed to come. He was older, tired-eyed, but kind. He walked through the house with a small bottle of holy water and a prayer book. At first, nothing happened. The house behaved like a normal house, almost polite. Then he reached the hallway near the basement door. He stopped mid-step. His face tightened, and he swallowed hard. "Do you feel that?" he asked quietly. My spouse nodded. I did not trust my voice. The priest raised the holy water and began to pray. The words were steady, practiced. The air changed. The temperature dropped so quickly my breath fogged. The light above us flickered. The stain on the wall darkened, and a fresh line of red slid downward as if the house was responding. The priest flinched but kept praying. A sound rose from the basement door, scratching like nails on wood. Slow and deliberate. The priest's hand shook. He sprinkled holy water. For a split second, the droplets hung in the air as if they had turned to glass. Then the basement door slammed so hard the walls shuddered. The priest stumbled back, eyes wide. He tried to speak, but his voice caught. A force shoved him, hard, across the hallway. He hit the opposite wall with a dull thud and slid down, stunned. My spouse screamed his name. I rushed forward, but the priest pushed himself up, shaking. "We have to leave," he whispered. The words were not fear. They were certainty. We helped him outside. The moment the cold air of the street hit us, the house behind the door felt normal again, like it was pretending. The priest did not look back. "Do not sleep there tonight," he said. "Do not stay. That place is not empty." After he left, we stood in the driveway staring at our own house. The windows looked dark. The shutters looked like eyelids. And behind them, something seemed to be listening, waiting for us to come back inside. We did, because we still believed we could outlast it. That was our second mistake. Chapter 6. The car won't start. After the priest left, we tried to pretend the blessing had simply gone poorly because the house was old. We tried to act like adults who could solve problems with repairs and logic, but the house had shifted. It was no longer content to scare us in small ways. It wanted decisions. It wanted direction. It wanted us to choose it. The first time we said out loud that we should leave, the power went out, not a gentle flicker, a hard, instant blackout that swallowed the house and left us standing in thick darkness. While the kids screamed upstairs, my spouse fumbled for their phone. No signal. No bars. The screen reflected our faces back at us, pale and uncertain. The power returned 10 minutes later as if nothing had happened. The second time we discussed leaving, the basement door opened by itself. We were in the kitchen. It was early evening. The kids were doing homework at the table, the normalcy almost convincing. Then we heard a soft click from the hallway. The basement door swung inward, slow and smooth, like someone had invited it. A cold draft slid across the floor and curled around our ankles. The smell of damp rot followed it, thick and sudden. The kids froze. "Close it," my spouse whispered. I walked to the hallway, my legs heavy. When I reached the door, the air felt colder than winter. The whispers rose, soft and eager, and my own voice murmured inside my skull. "Don't close it. You're safe down there." I slammed the door anyway and shoved the lock into place. The moment the latch clicked, the house sighed, an almost inaudible sound in the walls. That night, at 3:15, I woke to the sound of someone walking downstairs. Slow steps, one at a time. I held my breath and listened. The steps paused at the basement door, then came a faint scratching, like a finger dragging along wood. The scratching stopped. A minute later, I heard the same slow steps coming back up. When I checked the hallway in the morning, the basement lock was still engaged, but the doorframe held a fresh, pale mark, like something had pressed against it from the other side. 2 days later, we tried to leave anyway. We packed bags in silence. We loaded the car while the kids watched from the porch with wide, tired eyes. The sky was gray and low. The canal water behind the house was flat and dark. I turned the key. The engine turned over, coughed, and died. I tried again. The starter clicked weakly. Then nothing. My spouse stared at me. "It was fine yesterday." I popped the hood. Everything looked normal. The battery connections were tight. No obvious issues. The car simply refused, as if it had decided that leaving was not an option. Inside the house, the air felt warmer, comfortable, welcoming, and for one terrifying second, I felt relief at the idea of staying. That is when I realized the house was not only frightening us, it was training us. Chapter 7. The House Learns Your Voice. The next week, my thoughts stopped feeling private. I would stand in the shower and hear my own calm voice from the other side of the curtain, speaking as if it was only being helpful. "You're exhausted. They drain you. You deserve quiet." I would be setting plates on the table and feel anger rise because a fork was placed wrong, because a child breathed too loudly, because my spouse asked a question in the wrong tone. The anger felt instant and absolute. Then, afterward, it would vanish, leaving only shame. I began to notice gaps in my memory. Small ones at first. A moment where I could not recall walking from the living room to the hallway. A time when I found the basement light on without remembering turning it on. A night when I woke with dirt on my fingertips and the faint smell of concrete on my hands. My spouse began sleeping, facing away from me. They didn't say why, but I knew. In the darkness, my breathing did not always sound like mine. Sometimes, they claimed, it sounded like someone else breathing through my mouth. The kids changed too. They began drawing pictures of the house with dark shapes inside it. They started leaving their bedroom doors open, as if a closed door was a risk. One afternoon, our youngest said, matter-of-factly, "The house likes you, Dad." I laughed thinly. "Why do you say that?" He shrugged. "Because it talks like you." My stomach turned. That night, I stood at the top of the stairs, listening. The kids were asleep. The house was quiet. The clock in the hallway ticked softly. Then, from below, in the darkness of the living room, I heard my own voice speaking. Not in my head, in the air. Soft, patient, reasonable. "Come downstairs," it said. The words were exactly how I would say them to my kids if they were up too late. The same gentle firmness, the same calm certainty. My throat tightened. I did not move. The voice spoke again. "We can make it quiet." I backed away from the stairs. My foot bumped the hallway mirror. The mirror rattled faintly, and my reflection stared back at me with eyes that looked slightly too still. In that reflection, I saw my mouth twitch, as if it wanted to smile. I turned away and went back to bed without looking again. At 3:15, the house woke me, and in the dark, I felt something standing near the doorway, listening to my breathing, like it was counting. I did not open my eyes. I did not speak. I lay still and waited for morning as if morning could save us. It did not. Howie Chapter 8. The final night begins. The night everything broke apart started like any other. That was the cruelest part. We ate dinner quietly. The kids pushed food around their plates. My spouse kept glancing toward the hallway as if expecting the basement door to open. I tried to speak normally, tried to be a father, tried to make jokes that fell flat. Outside, the wind picked up. The canal water tapped softly against the dock. A distant siren wailed and faded. At 9 p.m., the lights flickered once. At 9:05, the thermostat dropped 5 degrees without being touched. At 9:10, the smell arrived. Rotten, metallic, thick enough to taste. The kids gagged. My spouse covered their mouth. I searched for a source like a person still clinging to logic. There was no source. At 10 o'clock, the house went silent. Not quiet. Silent. As if even the pipes and walls had stopped existing. Then the knocking began. Not on the door, not on the windows. From inside the walls, a slow, steady tapping that moved through the house like something crawling. The kids started crying. My spouse whispered that we should leave now, right now, even if we had to walk. I nodded, and the moment I did, The front door lock clicked. Not unlocking, locking, hard, final. I rushed to the door, tried the handle. It wouldn't move. I flipped the deadbolt. It refused. The door felt sealed, as if the wood had become part of the frame. Behind me, the tapping moved upstairs. Then came the voices, whispers at first, then clearer, multiplying, overlapping. Not sentences, not words. Just the feeling of many mouths trying to speak through the house at the same time. The air grew colder. Our breath became clouds. At 11:30, the stain on the hallway wall bloomed outward, spreading like ink in water. It ran in thin lines, branching, forming shapes that looked almost like letters. At 12 o'clock, the basement door rattled. The lock shook violently. The wood bowed outward, as if something heavy leaned against it from below. My spouse grabbed my arm. "Don't go down," they whispered. I did not want to go down, and yet my feet shifted toward the hallway on their own, as if the house had tied strings to my ankles. My own voice spoke from the basement door, warm and calm. "It's okay," it said. "I'll take care of everything." That was the moment I knew the house had been rehearsing. It had learned my tone. It had learned my patience. It had learned how to sound like comfort. The lock snapped. The basement door swung open, and a cold rushed out, so sharp it felt like knives, and the smell of damp rot rolled through the house like a wave. The whispers turned into a single, steady sound, a low, satisfied hum. My kids screamed upstairs, and the sound of their fear finally snapped something inside me awake. I ran to the stairs and shouted for them to stay in their room. My voice sounded small. The house's voice sounded confident. From below, it whispered, "Come closer." And then the clock in the hallway clicked to 3:14, 1 minute before the hour, 1 minute before the house woke fully, 1 minute before we stopped being a family and became something the house could own. Chapter 9, 3:15. At 3:15 a.m., the house did not wake me. It woke itself. Every light in the house turned on at once, bright and harsh. The sudden glare made my eyes sting. The temperature dropped so quickly, frost formed on the inside of the windows. The whispers erupted into a chorus. Not words, a crowd, a hungry, excited sound that made my skin crawl. The living room curtains snapped open on their own, revealing the canal behind the house. The water reflected the lit windows like glowing eyes. In that reflection, for a split second, I thought I saw faces beneath the surface, looking up. The basement door yawned open wider. From inside, the darkness seemed to move, thickening like smoke. My spouse clutched my shirt, shaking. The kids cried upstairs. The house's voice, my voice, spoke clearly now from the basement stairwell. "You're tired," it said. "Let me help." I did not answer. The voice continued, patient, like it had all the time in the world. "You can rest. You can be quiet. You don't have to carry them anymore." Images flashed in my mind, quick, sharp visions that did not feel like imagination. A man in a bedroom, holding a rifle, listening to a voice that sounded like his. A hallway soaked in invisible history. A family asleep, unaware of what the house was whispering into the one who would destroy them. The house was showing me the past, not to warn me, but to teach me. Because it wanted a repeat. It wanted a pattern. It wanted a story that ended the same way. I staggered, dizzy, and felt anger rise like fire. "They are the problem," the voice suggested. "They keep you from peace." My hands clenched. Then I heard my youngest upstairs call my name, small and terrified. The sound cut through the anger like cold water. I forced myself to look toward the stairs. My spouse's face was pale. Tears streaked their cheeks. They shook their head, pleading without words. I realized the house was not only speaking, it was trying to borrow my body, trying to use my hands, trying to wear my decisions. I backed away from the basement entrance and moved toward the kitchen, dragging my spouse with me. The house hummed louder. Cabinet doors began to open and slam shut. Plates rattled. A glass lifted off the counter and shattered without touching the floor, exploding like ice. The kids screamed again and I sprinted upstairs. The hallway felt longer than it should. The air pressed against my chest. Every step felt like wading through thick water. When I reached the kids' room, the door was closed. I grabbed the knob and pulled. It wouldn't open. From inside, the kids pounded and cried. Behind me, my voice spoke softly from the hallway. "Let them go," it said. I turned. At the end of the hall, near the mirror, my reflection stood still. I wasn't standing still. My reflection smiled. Not my smile. A careful, patient smile, like something learning. I looked away instantly, heart hammering. I grabbed the bedroom door with both hands and yanked until my shoulders burned. The door finally flew open. The kids stumbled out, sobbing, clinging to me. "Downstairs," I whispered. "Now." We ran. The house tried to stop us. The hallway lights flickered like strobe flashes. The floor seemed to tilt. The air grew so cold my lungs hurt. But we moved anyway, step by step. Family pressed together like one organism, one heartbeat. At the bottom of the stairs, the front door waited, sealed, locked. The house's voice sighed with disappointment. "You can't leave," it said gently. "You're already here." And then, behind the front door, something scraped. Not outside, inside the wood, like a nail tracing a name. My name. Chapter 10. Escape. I do not remember every second of that final hour. Fear does strange things to time. It stretches moments until they feel endless, then snaps them shut like a trap. But I remember the decision. I remember realizing that the house wanted the front door to be the only way out. So we did not use it. We ran to the back of the house toward the sliding door that faced the canal. The glass was fogged from the cold inside. My spouse tried to open it. It did not move. The house's voice laughed, not a sound but a sensation, like pressure in the skull. I grabbed a chair from the dining room and swung it at the glass. The chair hit with a crack, but the glass held. I swung again. A spider web of fractures spread. From the basement, the hum turned into a roar. The air grew so cold it hurt my teeth. I swung a third time. The glass exploded outward and winter air rushed in, sharp and clean, smelling like water and pine. We climbed through the broken frame, careful of shards, pulling the kids one by one. The canal wind slapped our faces. The dockboards were slick with frost. Behind us, inside the house, every light blinked off at once. The windows became black. For a heartbeat, the house looked dead. Then one upstairs light turned on. A single room, like an eye-opening. My voice drifted out through the broken door, calm and intimate. "Come back," it said. "You forgot something." We did not answer. We ran across the yard, barefoot in the icy grass toward the street. The neighbors' houses looked far away, like the road had stretched. Halfway to the curb, the ground beneath my feet felt warmer, strangely warm, like stepping onto a heated floor. I looked down. The grass beneath us was dark, as if burned. A thin red line traced through it like a vein. The house was drawing a boundary. It was trying to keep us inside its story. My spouse stumbled. I caught them. The kids cried. I forced my legs to move, one step at a time, refusing to look back at the windows. Then, suddenly the boundary ended. The grass returned to normal, the air warmed by a fraction. We reached the street, and the spell seemed to break, just a little, as if the house's power weakened beyond its own property. The nearest neighbor's porch light flickered on. A door opened. A man stepped out, blinking, confused. "What?" he began. My spouse grabbed his arm, choking on words. "Please, call the police. Call someone." The man stared at our bare feet, our shaking hands, the frost on our hair. His eyes slid past us to the house. He went very still. For a moment, I thought he would close the door. Instead, he nodded once and ran inside. Behind us, from 112 Ocean Avenue, the house made a sound I felt more than heard. A long, slow exhale. Disappointed, not defeated, as if it had simply lost this round. We did not go back for our things. We did not argue about boxes, furniture, memories. We drove away at dawn in a neighbor's car, huddled in borrowed coats, the kids asleep in the back seat from exhaustion. As the sun rose, the house disappeared behind trees and distance, but the name stayed with me like a bruise. For months afterward, I woke at 3:15 a.m. in whatever place we were staying. Every time I felt the same sharp awareness, the same sense of being listened to. Sometimes in the dark, I could almost hear my own calm voice from far away, as if it was calling from the end of a long hallway. "Come back," it would whisper. I never answered, because I learned the truth about that house. It was not haunted by the dead, it was hungry, and it fed on families. If you ever stand before a house with a history you think you can ignore, remember this. Some places do not care what you believe. Some places only care whether you stay long enough to listen. Epilogue, 3:15. Everywhere we told people a simpler version of what happened. We said the house had electrical problems, mold, stress. We said we could not afford to stay. We said the kids were having nightmares and we needed a fresh start. Most people accepted that. Some people did not ask questions, and I was grateful. But even after we were gone, the house stayed in our lives in small, sharp ways. The kids woke screaming for weeks. They refused to sleep in separate rooms. They hated closed doors. They flinched whenever the heater clicked on, as if any change in temperature meant something was coming. My spouse began keeping every light on in the evenings. They said darkness felt too crowded. Sometimes they would stare at a corner of a room with the same blank focus the priest had shown in the hallway near the basement door, and I would feel my stomach drop. As for me, I carried the worst part quietly. At 3:15 a.m., my eyes would open on their own. It did not matter where we were, a motel, a friend's spare room, a small apartment in another town. The same awareness would arrive like a hand on my shoulder, and I would lie there listening to the silence, waiting for the whisper. Most nights it never came. Some nights it did. Not loud, not dramatic, just my own calm voice, far away in the dark, as if coming from the end of a hallway that stretched too long. It would say my name once, then it would go quiet, like it was satisfied just to prove it could still reach me. I learned to sit up, drink water, breathe, and remind myself that I was not in that house anymore. I learned to check the clock and watch the minutes pass until my heartbeat slowed. I learned that fear can follow you even when the walls cannot. We never returned to 112 Ocean Avenue. We never went to court. We never sold furniture. We never asked for compensation. We did not want to fight with something that did not have to play by rules. Years later, I heard that another family tried to live there. I heard they lasted a month. I heard they lasted a week. I heard a rumor that someone saw lights turning on at 3:15 a.m., even when no one was inside. Maybe those were only rumors, or maybe the house did what it always did. It waited, because that is what hungry places do. They wait for the next family with a need strong enough to ignore warning signs. They wait for the next person who believes they can outlast a story. If you ever drive past a house that seems too cheap, too quiet, too ready to welcome you, remember this: sometimes the past is not finished. Sometimes it is only resting, and sometimes at 3:15 a.m. it wakes up. Stay safe out there tonight. You have been listening to American Haunted Tales.
Thank you for watching.